Hello, and welcome to today's live stream of all the modules in Beebo and Hector, and occasional info about Flat 5 and the other goings on. This week we are up to P. We covered Pan at the end of last week. Oh yes. The YouTube videos, or the live streams, now have chapter markers in them for the ones we've done previously. So if you want to jump to a particular thing, you can now easily find the letter and then jump to it. Because they're all in there, in the descriptions and in the chapter labels. So you can get around the existing live streams a lot more easily. In case they're all going to end up being in the manual and the QR codes that are on the pedal, so you'll be able to easily get to all of them. So, phaser. I'll get rid of the flanger here. I'll drop our little phaser in here instead. So, connect that one up. I'm running out of 1 and 3 here, so I'll run my reverb into 3 as well. And we'll connect up to 1 and 3. I probably don't need that reverb in, but you know, more reverb is better. So, as always, give me a yell if there's any questions, or you know, if you can't hear things well, or anything along those lines. Yeah, if there's just any other issues. So, yeah, this is the phaser. It's pretty straightforward. Yep, so this is the phaser with the inbuilt LFO. So it can take in tempo. Instead of taking in an external CV, which phaser external will, which I will show next. So you've got a couple of controls. So if we just give it you see phasing in all its magic. Wet dry is probably the main. So you go to all that. Remember, all of these are bindable by MIDI or internal CV or foot switches, all of those things, for most of them. Everything's bindable by MIDI. So if we just crank up our LFO frequency, which more? Color is just basically a different type of phaseriness, so you'll see that it's you see it's just, you know, much less of that particular resonant peak kind of feeling with the color off. Obviously there's feedback bass cut, does what it says on the box, which is remove bass from the feedback. And controls the frequency where that occurs, in case you don't want to end up too muddy. Not super relevant on this. We'll get some lower notes in there. It's more relevant. Feedback depth. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. That's the phaser, useful in many situations. Remember, as with any of the things, you can stack these in interesting ways. For instance, if you wanted a delay where the repeats have a phaser on them, just route the repeats of your delay to a phaser. Composition is always the big thing to do with Beebo or Hector. So, yeah, this phasor is happening on your direct signal. But if we go in here and disconnect our inputs, I probably don't need to show this for every single one of these type of modules, but, you know, I feel occasionally it's worth it. All right. Route our delay in like that. Now our dry doesn't have any phasor, but our repeats do. So if we have ludicrous amounts of that. So they've got that very obvious phasor on them. But our dry sound does not. So if we turn down our level there, you'll see my dry sound still no phasor, repeats have phasor. So again, that's a way to add different character into all of your things. The phasor being on the output of the delay, the return from the delay, will make it sound very different to it being on the input to the delay, the send. All right, that's the phasor. Phasor ext works very much like everything else it takes in ext, external controls. So instead of having no CV inputs, we'll just have to get around the camera. Grab that out, drop this one in, set those ones to there, and now it takes in this CV for its speed. And you'll notice it doesn't have any of the tempo controls in it anymore. Instead, it's speed. I can set this. I've got this very, very slow tempo at the moment. If you want to have even slower tempos, the looping envelope is the tool for the job there, where you can have quite glacial tempos. So again, you can do different effects just by throwing in your different CVs. So you can get a very powerful phasor like by doing that. So that's phasor external, just takes in your CV. Again, there's obviously, as we've covered, a giant pile of different things you can do with your CVs. You can, of course, take this LFO and process it with a slew limiter or something like that, or a filter. Remember, there's all of those wealth of options. Phasor stereo ext. It's exactly the same, except it's got stereo. So I'm not sure, you know, you get the gist. Same controls. Has a little bit of extra magic there. But yeah, basically, same one. So phasor stereo ext does, exactly the same controls, same connections, but it has stereo input and output. So that one should be pretty straightforward. I don't know. P, that's what we're up to. Okay, here we get to the magic and confusion. These ones are Hector specific, so they're not useful in any way, shape, or form that I can think of on Beebo, and I really should demo them on Hector. I have done stuff on these before, on pitch cal in and pitch cal out, specifically on videos just about them for Hector. What are they for and how do they work? I'll just show them quickly. So we need a CV input, which we don't have here, but we can show it on these ones. So it says what you meant to do with it in it. So it says press measure, then play your note that should be 0 volts. And then you press, then you stop. So then you then have to play the one that's 2 octaves up. So the idea is that you need to calibrate your scale somehow, because Eurorack works in volts per octave, and it's pretty chaotic. Obviously it's a voltage that comes in. The voltages aren't perfectly calibrated. Both from the output, the controller might be not sending out perfectly calibrated voltages, but also the inputs of Hector and the outputs of Hector for pitch are not perfectly calibrated. Why are they not perfectly calibrated, I see you ask? Because the inputs and outputs on Hector can take CV or audio. Some flexible systems have inputs that are just for CV and inputs and outputs that are just for audio. I didn't want to do that because I wanted to have maximum flexibility. However, that does flexibility often means maximum, arse. So it made things a bit more difficult, and that's why we need this. So you should follow that procedure, send in the 0 and then send the one that's 2 octaves up, and it will use the measure, and it'll say here what you've got, min and max level, and then it'll just say the scaling and offset that it works out. Yes, and that's because the inputs are all flexible, audio or CV, and therefore any calibration for the CV stuff would introduce distortion to audio. Because if it's just a couple of points of some type of scaling, even if it's lots of points of scaling, you're just introducing an audio distortion there. So that's why you need the pitch cal in, because otherwise you introduce confusing distortions to your audios. So pitch cal in, run that in anytime you're trying to do a volt per octave. It should run through a pitch cal in before going into the thing that takes volt per octave. If you're taking volt per octave input externally, if you're you can also take MIDI in, obviously, in which case you don't have to worry about this. So pitch cal in, you should always run through it. So it's a continuously needed thing, so you run into that and then into the module. It's not just a one-off calibration of the thing. And the different inputs are going to cal slightly differently, so you'll need it for every one you're running in. It is a bit of a fiddly bit, but that's the downside of flexibility. Pitch cal out is for the opposite way. This one's more difficult to calibrate because you'll have to listen to your other module. You can run that into the tuner to check. And then you have to, fiddle with the knobs on that one. Often the outs are often easier, and you don't need to. Well, you can control them on the destination as well, whatever you're running into. So yeah, that's why you'll need pitch cal in and out. So that's pitch calibration, which is really easy to show on Hector. Pitch detect. All right. This uses some similar things to the onset detector that we showed last week when we were showing O. And this means that you can drive a synth from a guitar or any other input like that. So you can detect pitch and put it into any of the oscillators if you want. Synthy sounds. So let us show that. So we'll need a thing that takes in we'll just go for the macro oscillator because it's a one we love. We've got a lot of options for. Maybe we should go for one of the resonators. All right. As always, before introducing one of the synthesizers, we need a way to control its volume because they're very, very loud. So turn that all the way down. We're going to chuck in our friendly macro oscillator there. And so we're going to need to connect some audio up to this. I like to have some control over my audio input range, just in case my guitar has a range that I don't, like it's either too loud or not compressed enough or something like that. I sometimes like to have some extra control running into the pitch detect. So I often will add my friendly saturator before that, which will just give me some control over levels. So if you chuck your saturator in, then put your saturator in there, saturator into pitch detect, and then pitch detect has got a couple of outputs, and you'll see what those are when we go there. So it can send MIDI out, which is quite handy. So you can connect it up to a anything that takes MIDI, your synthesizers and stuff. But it's also got a gate and a volt per octave pitch output. So gate is going to be so when you're playing a note, same as the onset detector. So gate, we want to connect up here. We'll connect this one up to trigger in this case, but obviously it'll have duration. We could connect that up to a VCA or something as well, or anywhere else we want to use the gate signal. Now we also want to connect up that volt per octave output, and we're going to connect that up to the volt per octave CV. Volt per octave is just the Eurorack way of saying pitch. So sometimes we use both words for added confusion. All right, now we've got those connected up. We will connect up the out to the VCA and the VCA to the sounds. There we go. And now we still have dry, so we'll get rid of that. And we're going to have to tune these. So the main one we need to control, as always with the guitar input, is the silence threshold, because we want to probably change where we're detecting our silence. So we'll just go up and see if that does things. And we might need to poke our... we've turned the VCA down quite low. Yep, all right, awesome. So we're now getting a synth sound generated by this. So that's going into the macro oscillator. That was kind of fun, actually. Okay, yep, 2-operator FM sound kind of sounds a bit more distinctive. So in that case, I didn't really need the saturator because my output from my pickups is suitable. But you might need to either pick that up or compress it a little bit, whichever way it makes the tracking feel the best, because you might need to squish your inputs a little bit, or keep them within a range that feels good. Now, if I attempt to put on the guitar, this, as with all pitch tracking, higher stuff tracks better. And we might need to control things to get this to track perfectly. So yeah, you'll notice we're getting synthy notes from guitar-y part. Again, definitely tune the silence threshold so it cuts the notes in. Often you'll hear, if notes aren't triggering correctly, it's handy to check whether you're getting whether it's still trying to continue playing that note or not. that is often easier to find out if you connect it up to the VCA instead of... So yeah, instead of just a trigger. Because you want to know whether that gate's active or not, basically. So, yeah, weird synthy action. Obviously, some of the synths are, and we can set all our parameters in here. So yeah. Again, this you've got a lot of synthesis options. Ranging from the normal to the obviously weird. And yeah, lower notes will work less well than higher notes. And any of this pitch tracking stuff has got kind of, well, it tracks okay at that speed. Obviously, if you get into shreddy territory, it's going to have some trouble. That's about, yeah, well. Yeah, tracking that seems to work pretty well, but you know. Obviously, it doesn't track a lot of expressive controls because, again, you're not sending anything about your volume envelope or something of your playing into the synth. You can, of course, do that, though. The VCA, if you put any of the VCAs after the synthesis option, you can send some of your volume information from your guitar into that. So you can control, you can add some dynamic control from your guitar or whatever your input source is into the synthesis as well by using things like the envelope follower. Because yeah, you don't have to use the envelope follower can be handy to do kind of compression style effects, but you can do those kind of effects with the synthesizer as the audio source and the guitar as the control kind of source. So that's basically what this just is, using the guitar as or whatever audio input you've got as the control source for the synth. So that's what the pitch detector will be doing, giving us onset information and pitch information. And yeah, then you get your synth kind of stuff. If you want to do FM stuff with your guitar. For some reason. You can probably make that sound. Also, if you're going to play bass stuff, low notes will track less well. So how can you get around that? Basically, just because of physics, low notes mean that you've got less information to detect because they've got lower frequency. They take more time to bounce around. You can get around that by shifting down your frequency here. Or octave shifting the detected pitch in stuff in any other way. So if you go to what's called imprecise notes, you're gonna get to actual detuning as well. So you can either tune very carefully with the knobs, we'll tune just way down, or of course you can always use the data entry one to get a particular note. So yeah, see, obviously you can get relatively, I don't know how chunky this will be. Okay, yeah, that's more like it. But yeah, you'll get detuned, so it's easier just to hold this one, lock that one in, and now instead of having an imprecise measure like these ones will give you, I can just go. What was I going? Sorry. Yeah, maybe -2. And just hit submit. And now I've got an exact number. And we're down by, and now our notes will be much lower than what I was playing, which, might make some fun noises. And again, lots of different synth options. So you can get into some more, bassy territory. Even though I'm playing quite high up on the, I'm playing at the 12th fret now. And the nice thing is that it will still track fast because I'm detecting it up high. Obviously these ones will be pretty hectic, but the drum models obviously. And then these ones can actually be kind of interesting because you can go for super crank that decay time like right up. Which is kind of fun. So yeah, you've got obviously tons of synth options, and you can do more complicated stuff with the synths as well. Have multiple things happening with the synths. Obviously, modulate them using all of the normal options you'd have for synthesis. That's actually that's quite a fun sound. No, don't like that last bit. Yeah, so there's some opportunities in the pitch tracking stuff. It's not fantastic, and it requires a little bit of massaging to make it work perfectly. But those kind of techniques are handy. Remember, I didn't in this case need to use the saturator, but sometimes it'll help to be able to control, especially if, usually you'll want to turn up your the pre-gain on the saturator and turn down the post a little bit, and then you have a little bit of compression, which often helps the tracking, because you'll keep your notes a bit more consistent. Then being able to pitch shift things around just by actually changing the frequency of the macro oscillator, or whatever oscillator you're running into. You can, of course, change the notes more directly. The output of the pitch detect, and shift that around. So yeah, you've got these settings are all, pretty handy. And then you can get your synth noises. Which can be quite versatile. So that's that's pitch detect. Quite versatile synth option. Next up in P. Again, if you have any questions. Pitch shift. All right. Well, we could use the pitch detect from the previous module with the pitch shift. Why not? All right. Instead of running into this macro oscillator with the pitch detect, we're going to shift our pitch based on what pitch we've detected. This could get very strange, but it's kind of, you get the gist. So let's pitch shift always. If you want to do pitch shifting, you should nearly always use the time stretch. Time stretch is the correct module for this. However, pitch shift does some interesting stuff. It will always introduce delay though. So you should only run pitch shift on things like a reverb or a delay line. So we can pitch shift our reverb because we've got one over here. Let's get rid of this macro oscillator. Let's get rid of this VCA. Maybe, yeah. Let's get rid of this VCA. And then we'll choose something pretty intense for the reverb. This one's pretty big. We'll crank that guy up. And then we'll pitch shift this reverb. So I'll get rid of these outputs. Chuck that there. Connect up the input to the, what's it called? Reverb. Run some dry. So you'll see there's an audio path going into the saturator and then into the pitch detect. And that audio is getting transformed into pitch information. Now we will also connect this pitch detect up to this pitch shift. So we want the volt per octave pitch that's connected up to the pitch shifting here. So this shift here will be controlled by this pitch detect. So now the reverb is going to have a pitch based on a shift based on what the pitch was detected as, which will probably be pretty weird, but and yeah, that is pretty weird. But you see how we can, pitch shift the reverb like that. Even though that's the convolution reverb, we're running a pitch shift on the return from it. Because again, the convolution reverb doesn't have any other controls for that kind of stuff. So we're pitch shifting the return. We could obviously pitch shift the signal that's going into the reverb as well. If we want to have this pitch be in a particular scale, so it sounds a bit less weird, we can chuck the quantizer in here on that pitch signal and then quantize the pitch to a particular scale, or even just like a very limited set of notes. Perhaps we just want the root and the fifth or something like that, and we can quantize it so it snaps between those ones. Yeah, so that's easy to do. We just chuck in the quantizer. But related to pitch-shifted reverbs, after pitch shift we have pitched verb, which is a pitch-shifted reverb. So I've kind of shown you two ways you can do this. Either you've got your pitch shift and your reverb, or you've got your pitch-shifted reverb. Pitch verb isn't a combination of a convolution reverb and a pitch shifter. Instead, it's an algorithmic reverb. Algorithmic reverbs are, of course, what most pedals do, and are therefore not as good as the convolution reverbs that we normally do. However, they do have lots of controls, which is nice. So you have a wealth of different control options that you can modulate all of these parameters from CVs. And there's freezing and stuff like that. So there are some advantages to the controllable modulatable stereo in, stereo out pitch verb. So, yeah. You see reverb there, and we can pitch shift that. For all your weird pitchy noises. You can, of course, modulate this over time with any of the sequences. It's got modulation options. And it can get quite huge. Especially if you crank this down. So you've got a huge range of controls there. And all of these modulatable. Which is the huge advantage of this one. And now you've got frozen reverb, which you can pitch shift, which is kind of fun. So yeah, you can pitch shift your frozen stuff. Again, the real power of some of these modules is when you add a modulation source into them. So if we connect up, we've got all of these giant collection of options here. If we modulate any of them from this friendly modulator we have here, and we'll get rid of this pitch detect unless I need it at any point in the future. See how that's evolving quite a lot over time now? As we're starting to modulate some of these options from here, there are just a ton of options to modulate. Things like hold, obviously, you can modulate, which become quite interesting. Obviously, modulating pitch, we showed that. You get into quite weird stuff if you want, just by modulating some of the parameters. All right, pitch verb. And I think that's near the end of P. Pitch tech, pitch verb. Oh no, we've got a few more in P. Polynote to CV. Yep, so in this one, I will have to connect up a MIDI keyboard to show this effectively. This one's a bit of a chunky module. So you take in your MIDI, connect up your MIDI, and you get a collection of volt per octave outputs and gates out of it. So you notice if we connect this one up to this one, you've got a pile of gates, 4 of them, and a pile of pitches, and you have the one velocity. Because historically, lots of keyboards didn't only send, for a chord, they'll only send a single. They don't send per pitch, per note velocity. modern stuff using MPE nowadays does send per pad, per note velocity. But polyphonic aftertouch and stuff like that was historically relatively rare. So this one's set up to just take normal velocity out of that. So again, that's a way of taking in MIDI and sending it to any of the internal oscillators. Obviously, if you're going to set that up with a macro oscillator, you're going to need multiple oscillators. So you're going to have to duplicate your oscillators. And then for any of your control options, it'll be handy to map, to run things like a sum or something into all of the CVs you want to control, and then control that one as the actual control. So it controls multiple modules from a single one. That's a handy technique if you're going to run multiples of things. So that's, polynote to CV, just connect them up. MIDI connects as normal. Just your MIDI in, then you got your notes out. So yeah, that's, pretty straightforward. Pitch, all right. Power amp super, power amp cream. These I added so I'd have some amp options in case anybody needed them for NAMM quite a few years ago. Nowadays, I would thoroughly recommend using the NAMM amps instead, because the ones that are way back here, amp and NAMM, because these are fancy. The advantages that the algorithmic amps have, they also eat tons of CPU, but the other amp, the NAMM amps also eat tons of CPU. These ones do have more controls, obviously, because you've got a basic tone stack. So, you've got continuous controls over those, which you can, bind up to MIDI and stuff like that. I personally don't love the sound of them, but there are actually quite a few people that do thoroughly enjoy them and use them on stage and stuff, with guitar and with bass. Oh, what am I doing? Yeah, here we go. So yeah, there are actually both of those work in exactly the same way, just a different sounding amps. So yes, the advantage is obviously that they've got more controls. The disadvantage is they're much less authentic than the what's called the neural amp modeler stuff. And in the future, obviously, once you're able to import your own captures, you'll just have a wealth of options for the neural amp modeler stuff. So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend checking out those. The last module in P is product. It lets you multiply two things together. What else lets you multiply two things together and is also the same kind of thing? It's a ring mod. So if you want to do ring modulation for reasons, this is what product can do. Product can do many other things too. I'll just get rid of this pitch verb here. The most useful thing product can often do, you can use product just as a make things less loud module for any of your CVs, because it's just multiplying it by a thing. So if you run a CV into it and put this here, it'll be half as much level of that CV. See, it's got the two inputs, so A and B. So these inputs are added on to the value that's coming in. So if you connect something up to A and B, a CV into each, it'll just multiply those two CVs together, and you can leave these at 0. Otherwise, they will be added on first, so it can constrain the range that they'll be operating in, which is slightly confusing. But it means you can easily put, if you just want a CV into one of these, you put the CV into this one, leave this knob alone, and then in the other one, set the knob to the multiplier that you'd like. So yeah, imagine that there's input, the CV input and this input, those two are added together, and then it's multiplied against the other input, where its two bits are added together. So that's product, and that's the end of P. So next week, we will be going on to Q, where we have quantizer. And, and then one of the very fun ones that people, that there isn't enough information about that people should look into more. Rotary is coming up soon too when we get to R. So if there's any last minute questions, please ask them. Otherwise, that will be the end of this week's live stream. Thank you, as always, for checking it out. These things, of course, will be this. We will We'll add the chapters like we have for the other videos onto this one, and you'll be able to easily navigate these in the future. So, thanks for checking out the live stream, and we will see you all hopefully next week with some other excitement.